Doctor Who has been going heavy on the messaging this season. It's had the scariest of villains. Absolutely petrifies kids. And their parents. And the interviews have been wild, with the costume designer saying that they really want to put men in skirts. And so it was their job to work out how to warm the audience up to it, to boil the frog slowly with a kilt. We even had Ncuti hating on the indigenous people of his country, so that was nice. But when the actors weren't telling the audience to stop watching, they were making the TV show itself. And it leads me onto Boom, the one message that I couldn't understand. All of the rest was pretty typical, we've seen it all before, but Boom was confusing because it didn't make any sense. And then I realised it did. I was just looking at the show through my eyes, and I'm not the target audience. And it's not enough for the BBC to not make something for the target audience. They have to be actively anti those people, and Boom is.
Hang on a minute. Who put you in charge?
It starts with what I thought was a contradiction about faith.
I mean, most armies would notice, but not this lot. You know why? Because they have faith.
Only for at the end to get a very different message about faith.
He's not gone. He's just dead.
Keep the faith supplies.
Even just from these two clips, it did seem a little bit weird, but then the show goes further and he tries to explain it.
I thought you didn't like faith much, Doctor.
Just because I don't like it, doesn't mean I don't need it.
Now, the simple thing to do would just be to write it off as bad writing. Moffat just can't write, except we know that he can. We also know that Moffat isn't stupid, and something that's obviously contradictory would only make sense if it came from an idiot. So I thought I must be missing something, and I was. I just wasn't enough of a bigot to comprehend it.
The magic word that keeps you never having to think for yourself.
That fault lay solely with me. If you go back and look at examples, it's two very different sorts of faith. The first is a religious faith.
I'm Anglican.
Most armies would notice, but not this lot, because they have faith. Do you know how ridiculous you sound?
They were clerics based off the Church of England. That means that their faith is in something greater than themselves and an idea that goes back literally thousands of years. They didn't come up with those ideas yesterday. A group of 20-year-olds didn't get together on TikTok and come up with them. They were written down and given to them thousands of years ago and have stood the test of time. And they believe that this is actual history. It genuinely happened. Whether you believe in them yourselves or not is irrelevant. They are fixed. They are static. They come from time immemorial, and they are greater than the people that believe in them. This leads to people who are stable and solid, but most of all, anti-revolutionary. They don't morph or change. There's no convincing them of new things. The entire point of their faith is to conserve the idea that came about thousands of years ago. Compare that to that of the child.
He's not gone. He's just dead.
Keep the faith supplies.
Her beliefs were made up yesterday.
But he gathered her up early so she can be in heaven with him like an angel.
And her faith, it never happened. In fact, when she talked about what her dad told her, everyone else looks at each other as if she's an idiot.
So she can be in heaven with him like an angel.
They know he lied to her. They know he made it up. It's a fantasy, but it was a comforting fantasy.
Get away from him.
Them.
What?
Me.
What?
I'm them.
You're who?
It's this faith which is praised.
Keep the faith supplies.
It's this faith which the Doctor thinks that he should embrace himself.
Just because I don't like it, doesn't mean I don't need it.
The faith of a child. And children are renowned for several things, but one of them is imprinting. Ignorant, they're naive, they don't know anything about the world and just believe whatever they're told. They can be convinced of literally anything. If an authority figure tells a child something, that child will believe it. Then it solidifies within the child as they grow up, and in 20, 30 years, they still believe it because they've probably never even thought about those things ever again. So many people are taught ideas at school which they never question, and they form the foundations of their future lives, even if they're incorrect. It's this childlike faith, this give me the information that I need to believe, I'll believe anything attitude that is praised within the Doctor.
Would you like to look at some old photographs to remember the good times?
And that is shown both in the show and in this interview. Because the people the Doctor doesn't like is the clerics. It is the Church of England. Not only is his dislike for their faith aimed solely at them, you're idiots, you had faith.
The magic word that keeps you never having to think for yourself.
But the very statement of the show backs it up. Thoughts and prayers. Sending thoughts and prayers to someone is religious. It is based in something greater than yourself. It's saying, I want the big man in the sky to come and look after you. Compare that to what Moffat would prefer that people did. While the interviewer was talking about the absolute futility of religion, he was like, Yes, I always think about that. I'm sending thoughts and prayers. How about cash? You could spend cash or help. You could do something. Get up off your arse and do something. Act. Become an activist.
I, as an activist,
We are both activists.
This represents progression.
You know all these causes and ideas and groups that we highlight in our shows? Don't just agree with them. No, send money. Do something to aid them. Become one of them and join in. This is why it didn't make any sense with what he was talking about. People were dying and he was going, yeah, don't say thoughts and prayers, give money. That doesn't even work in that example. Oh, I'm sorry your close friend has died. Here's £20. Makes you a bigger arsehole. But if you look at it from the perspective of someone who is an activist, someone who is trying to push a cause, well, now the cash makes sense, doesn't it? Say something useful or do something useful. And on top of the idea that he doesn't like religious faith because that can't be shaken, whereas a child's faith can just be basically instilled in her at will.
Keep the faith splice.
The magic word that keeps you never having to think for yourself.
Well, we've also got one of the enemies of the show, whether the algorithm is bad or not. And he says, well, it depends what you use it for. If you use it to reinforce people's pre-existing prejudices, otherwise known as beliefs, like if somebody is already religious and then you use the algorithm to reinforce that religion, well, that's bad. I'm fairly sure that's bad. But what's bad about that is that you are reinforcing their pre-existing beliefs, not the algorithm. And so the opposite of that, of what would be good, would be if you use the algorithm to give somebody new beliefs. Well, that's good.
Never having to think for yourself.
That's a good thing for an algorithm to do. If you brainwash someone with an algorithm, it would make it a moral good. Where have we heard that before? This is why the unshakable religious faith is deemed to be the villain, and the child, the one who can be convinced, the one who can be run through the system, run through the algorithm and have her opinion changed so easily that anything her dad says to her, she will believe. Anything an authority figure says to her, she will believe. Well, that's the faith that we need to embrace. Because earlier on, he riles against it as if you must be stupid.
Most armies would notice, but not this lot, because they have faith.
You have faith, but you don't think about anything.
The magic word that keeps you never having to think for yourself.
But that's because you're not analysing and deconstructing your already existing opinions. It's not true for the child. She doesn't think about anything, she just does. As long as you're embracing the new revolutionary ideas, don't think about them. You don't have to think if an authority figure tells you something. Her authority figure was her dad, and so she just believed anything when he was around. Was it strange when he came around as a hologram and she didn't realise he was a hologram?
John Francis.
He just appeared and started showing her pictures, and she sat down like a child in school and started reading them. There was a war going on around her. She didn't care because she was so busy doing what she was told.
Would you like to look at some old photographs to remember the good times?
There's a lot in this about how things like algorithms, well, they're just tools, aren't they? It depends what you use it for. And I think he'd have the same opinion as for faith. It's not that faith is good or bad. It's what it's used for. If it's faith in the new revolution, then good for you, comrade. But if it's religious faith, unchangeable faith, if it's solid, if it means that you're standing in the way of their change, that's where the problems start.
Oh, no, I'm a Libra. I can't make decisions like this.
What has been pushed in Doctor Who isn't based in fact or reality. In fact, it directly contravenes it. It's knocking out solid, firm foundations which have lasted thousands of years and replacing it with unstable new ones which rely on simply being told what is real rather than actually it being real in the first place. How do I know if this is true? Well, you've got to go and ask me and I'll tell you what you should believe. They want to knock out firm foundations and replace them with sand, because once you'll believe something that you know isn't true, they can get you to believe anything.
Twitter might kick off, and in dark little corners people might argue, but that's not the real world.
And the more you go down this path, the more all the problems with the episode make more sense. Why did he hate the soldiers in the first place? Why did he treat them like villains? Why was he so angry with them? They were the victims.
Are you aware of an ordained Anglican?
Are you aware your face is ringing?
Because if you're like, well, he's just on a mine, he's blaming her for him being on the mine. He had nothing to do with it. The soldier had nothing to do with it. They were dying for the same reason he was. It had nothing to do with them.
The magic word that keeps you never having to think for yourself.
Prove it.
What, seriously?
And yet he's calling them stupid, that they don't notice. Even tells her at one point that she should surrender. She's like, I don't have the power to.
Just surrender.
Lose. Give in.
They were leaving.
Leaving is good. Never coming back is better.
They were the ones that needed help because they were being killed by a third-party corporation. So why did he think they were the villains? Why was he treating them like enemies?
Rid the universe of your filth. Why don't you just die?
Well, it was because of their faith. It was because they were religious.
How much of the countdown left?
3 minutes, maybe.
Thoughts and prayers.
That is why he spat bile at her. So back to the child. Who was her authority figure? Well, it was her father, and he was religious. He was also dead, though, wasn't he?
I'm safe with Daddy.
Safe.
Both of her parents had been removed from the equation. She was now on her own. And what was she learning from? A hologram that was created by the third-party corporation.
What happened to you, John?
I was humanely terminated.
By the actual villains of the show, was now teaching the child her new belief system. And there she was, sitting down, having faith, and completely swallowing all of it. And that was what the doctor praised.
Would you like to look at some old photographs to remember the good times?
Just because I don't like it doesn't mean I don't need it.
Oh, it was a bit of her father.
Yes, a bit. Remnants. But most of it was a third-party algorithm.
Shut up in Google.
That is against my digital protocol, sir.
He was a husk owned by a corporation. And after she's been trained in the new belief system and just swallowed whatever she said after she had faith in her authority figure, what was she going to do? Oh yeah, she was going to go out and become a CEO of a major corporation and start influencing the world.
Future president of something.
She wasn't going to have kids herself, no. She had better things to do. She wasn't going to just think about any of this stuff. She was going to send cash. She was going to influence. She was going to be an activist.
This represents progression.
And do you think that you should learn from an algorithm? That you shouldn't think for yourself? That you should just have faith in the institutions and the corporations? No? Well, that doesn't really matter, does it? Because just because you don't like it, it doesn't mean you don't need it. That comment at the end could just as easily be interpreted as, just because I don't like something doesn't mean it shouldn't be forced upon me, as it's good for me and I'm just too stupid to realise. There are many ways you can take that comment. And it's not the first time we've seen in this show the idea that children should be separated from their parents. We actually saw it in the first one. These babies in test tubes didn't even have them. They were being grown by the state, taught by the state, raised by the state. There's no doubt who's the authority figure in that scenario that the children should just be swallowing and believing, having faith in. And yes, you do have the obvious comment that they were still like, oh my god, why didn't you just slaughter them all? Which was particularly horrific.
Refuse to stop the babies being born, but once they're born, they don't look after them.
But afterwards, the moral message was that they should definitely be looked after by the state, raised, paid for, and educated. There's no doubt who should have owned them in that scenario. Combine this with Doctor Who as a whole. This series entirely aimed at kids. It's a very childish show.
Greet you, good to greet you, good to say how diddly did you.
Not normally one to castigate, but you were two people I'd love to defenestrate. Russell T Davies has spoken about his priorities.
It's a more welcoming world in schools. You know, we now have people who can come out in schools and be happy and thrive, which when I was that age was literally impossible.
That Davies writes about things that interest and concern him now. Like the weather. When he started writing in 2004, he was worried that children and younger audiences were always being told about death and destruction, and he didn't want them to walk to school thinking, oh my god, I'm going to die. But now, in 2022, that's all changed. There's no problem with them walking to school thinking they're gonna die now. Because now, that speech seems hopelessly naive. You've got to be more honest. You've got to talk about it. You've got to say, you are going to flood, the temperature's going up, or you're letting us down. If you don't tell children we're all gonna die, then you're doing them a disservice.
Oh, it's broken. Most of the universe is knackered.
No, I think it's extremely weird for someone that doesn't have kids to be this interested in them. It's not your job to educate kids who aren't yours. But he clearly doesn't share that opinion. In 2005, I was trying to care for the audience and look after them. But now I'm in a position where I have to listen to that audience because those young viewers are active. They're activists.
I, as an activist, we are both activists.
They're engaged with this. They're passionate. It's their world. We'll be dead and gone. No, it's their world, and they're much more engaged. This is why the adults in the stories are brushed off, made the villains, even when they are the victims of the episode, because it's their beliefs, their ancient traditions, their faith that goes back thousands of years, which is preventing the change of the future, the progress that we can all have, the progress that their children want.
The magic word that keeps you never having to think for yourself.
The ones that they're engaged with, passionate about, because it's their world, not yours, so shut up, you old fogey. Boom is a story where the parents and their traditions, their beliefs, created the problems. That's why they're treated like the villains by the Doctor.
Perfect. What, seriously?
They didn't stand up to the corporations who destroyed everything and took advantage of them. But the child can. As long as she sits there and has faith in new ideas, as long as she listens to the authority, well, she can then go on and be a CEO and change the world. fix the world because they'll all be dead and gone. The adults were dying, but she survived.
Future president of something.
We're channeling our anxiety into fiction and not applying enough of the anxiety to fact. The Doctor Who episodes aren't meant to be fantasy. They're meant to be stories about real life. They're intended to carry a message to be given to people. It's not a bug that they can't stop putting their values into things. It's a feature. This is why I talk about masculine values being put into something, because someone's values have to, and if you don't want your values put into something, someone else will put theirs in instead, as values and beliefs are the foundation of every story. The Lord of the Rings values and beliefs are masculinity and Christianity, and if those values weren't in it, it wouldn't be Lord of the Rings.
There's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for.
That he's been proud of the things he's made and its message, but it didn't attract an audience. There's always a danger of being too worthy or pedantic, of teaching too much. And that's why he said, we tried that and we'll try something else. We'll keep going. We'll keep trying new things. We'll keep morphing and changing the message or changing how much of the message is in it until we can get people to swallow it. Because they need to, like the child on the floor looking at her dead dad giving her pictures from an algorithm. We'll keep changing what we're doing until the audience sits down and believes what they're told.
Remember the good times.
Just because I don't like it doesn't mean I don't need it.
That's why he won't be shying away from putting messages in Doctor Who. He won't stop discussing the weather. That's the 800-pound gorilla in the room. And when you see it from this dynamic of the parents, the adults, the people with solid foundational beliefs going back thousands of years being the enemy versus the children, who's naive, ignorant, impressionable, ready to be educated and have that go forth and change the world as they never think about it again or consider whether they were lied to. Many other things make sense, such as why we're supposed to care about a child's opinion on literally anything. Why there's a push for parents to listen to their children, bear their opinions in mind, and learn from them. Because they're the ones who pick up the new social order so quickly. But I think most of all what it explains is why they keep telling everyone to stop watching. Why are they just so antagonistic? Why was everyone saying, we don't care about you, we don't need your views, there'll be new people coming in. Even going down to just calling them mediocre compared to his absolutely flawlessness. Hating your audience isn't good for your view count. But what if that's the point? I said before that this attitude could just be because they didn't need the old audience, meaning the United Kingdom, and they were going after America. I still think this is true, you're just a bigger nation. But as such, you have more people of the target demographic that already believe the things which are being put in this show. Over here, it's mainly limited to cities, but largely London. You do that in the US or California, you've got a way bigger pool of viewers. But that view was once again thinking like me, and not like them. They don't see people as people, they see people as categories, as intersecting identities. As a note, this is from the government of Oregon, and I have to say, this whole PowerPoint is wild. But as such, because they see everyone as just a group of various different categories that all connect at a certain point, they can break down people into very specific categories, and then hate you based on it. This is why Ncuti Gatwa didn't just hate mediocrity. What he hated was excellence. Why should I be excellent or even aspire to the term excellent? No, I want to be loved just for existing. He didn't even want to be mediocre. He didn't even want to aspire to be mediocre. Why should he? He exists, and that should be enough. The other categories of his identity should make up for the fact that he doesn't need any talent, or he doesn't need to work. He doesn't even need to aspire to be mediocre, because the rest of his identity is enough. That's why he didn't rant about mediocrity. No, it was white mediocrity that he despised. It was that intersection of two ideas. Now, obviously, this is just jealousy and bitterness as he looks at people who are just better than he is. He wishes he could be them and have the talent that they do. But it doesn't matter what the truth is, it matters what their perception of it is. Because that's how they will respond to it. And that's how you end up at the idea that you can hate faith, but only some of it. And whether you hate the faith or not depends on the identity of the person, the category of the person. Well, if this child is actually going along with the algorithm we're giving her, is actually believing all the ideas she's being told, then she can go forth and have a big career and be a CEO and influence the world. Because she'll influence the world in the way we want her to, because she'll have the foundational principles that we've given her. And then you've got all those pesky religious folk, the parents, the adults, the old viewers, the classic viewers. Well, we don't want them to watch. They need to turn off and go outside because we know they won't consume our new ideas. They won't believe any of them because they have faith in an older set of ideas. Whether it be religion or tradition, it doesn't matter because those ideas are solid. They've survived the test of time and they are unshakable. As such, there's no point in talking to you. We really need you to just get out of the way so we can teach the people who can be molded. Your beliefs are based in reality and ours aren't, and so we need need you to leave. How else are we going to teach these people these things that clearly don't make any sense when you keep proving them wrong? You are standing in the way of change, standing in the way of progress. And so we need you to leave. But we'd quite like you to leave your kids behind so that they can watch. In 3 of the 4 episodes, we've had kids where the adults left them behind to fend for themselves. Whether they just left because their bosses told them to and left the kids on the space station, or in Boom, where they died. The Christmas special was entirely about kids that had been ditched by their parents. The companion ditched by her parents. The baby she saved was, and let's not forget, the timeless child. The doctor is exactly the same. Either way, someone took over to raise the kids and teach them the way they should behave. It was just never their parents. How many times does something have to happen before it's not a coincidence? Davis isn't a parent, but he definitely thinks he should be telling them what to believe. And he needs to, because we'll be dead and gone. It's going to be their world, and because they're engaged and passionate, they can make it. That's why you've got to say we're going to flood. You've got to talk about the weather, or you're going to hugely let us down, even though us will be long gone. You don't want to let us down by letting this opportunity go, because they've got the kids now, and they need to teach them what to believe. And for that, you need to go outside and touch grass. Please, for God's sake. And so they are. They were told to turn off the TV, and then the ratings dropped. These are the lowest views of all time. People are turning off. There's still millions, though. Are those actual viewers, or are those just people leaving the TV on? Is it the television raising the child? I need you to shut up. There it is. Doctor Who. That's a kid's show. Bang. You watch that. And they don't know what's being watched, or they don't care. The television is an authority figure. The BBC is a long-term institution. It's an authority figure. That's how Davies can send his message in the first place. But one of the most convincing things for all of this with me was, why did Tennant come back? Why did Tennant come back? And rather than actually making the show good to raise the viewer count, why did they destroy him?
Yes, we know. We know everything. Thanks. And you know nothing.
That is the face of a guy who has absolutely had enough of your shit. Actively hated him. Actively broke him down.
Waited your whole life?
You wish.
Well, David Tennant joined the show in 2005, 19 years ago. So let's say you start watching Doctor Who at 9. You're now 28 and have kids of your own. If they wanted the parents to stop watching, what would you do? You'd bring back what they loved about the show and rip it apart. Because they don't need you anymore. You're too old. You're too set in the ways. They can't convince you. Your foundations, your principles, your long-term beliefs, your faith is solidified. They need you to leave because now you've got kids. And now, we're not a family show. We're a kids show. We don't make things for the adults anymore because they can't be convinced. So we make something which the adults despise. But the little dudes, they don't know any better. What better way to do that than to bring back what you enjoyed in the first place and tear it to shreds? What better way to tell the family audience,
Go yourself. Is that clear? I hope it is.
Well, rather than actively telling them to leave, anyway. We brought Tennant back and told you that we hated him. But just in case you didn't get the message, we're gonna actively tell you we hate you too. The beatings will continue until you turn off the TV.
I promise I can help him get home and then you'll never see me again.
You're assuming he as a pronoun.
And you kind of think, well, why now? Well, this is something that wouldn't have happened before. Doctor Who's audience was the UK. We're an overflowing country as it is. There is no more audience, but partnering with Disney allows them to access the American audience, which not only has more people that would agree with them, but there's also more youngsters who could come in who obviously believe in all of this stuff. It's their world, remember.
It pulls up, then settles. That ship didn't crash. It parked.
We know everything. Thanks.
That's why they could be so confident about it. But also, they've got 2 series of that Disney money. Do they really care if they're successful or profitable? They've worked for the BBC. They've never needed to care about profit or viewers before. So what's their worst case scenario? They attempt this and get 2 series to do it? In the minds of an activist, I'd imagine they think that's worth it. We tried that. We'll try something else. And we're gonna keep going. We're trying new things. This is just the latest in the new things that they're trying. And whether it works or not, as long as we've convinced new people, then maybe we can help change the world. If that sounds psychotic to you, well, because it is. This isn't a unique attitude. This is the attitude of Hollywood. From the boys, yes, I mean, we've always been pushing the message. I'll admit it was a little more bold in this season than they have in past seasons, but the world is getting more coarse, less elegant, and the urgency of our team's writing reflects that. We're angrier and more scared as the years go on. That's being reflected in our writing. Homelander, he is weak and insecure, but also has power and ambition. It's a deadly combo. Of course he'd feel victimized, and that people were angry with him. All he ever wants is to be more powerful, even though he's completely inadequate in his abilities to handle it. This is white male victimization.
What I care about is the reality of goodness, not the perception of it.
Unchecked ambition. And those issues just happen to reflect a guy who led the United States. And it's a bigger issue than just him. The more awful people act, the more fans they seem to be getting. Maybe it's because your morality is opposite good, and so everything you hate is actually moral and good, and that's what people are supporting, as opposed to you're evil. Maybe you're the baddies.
And what I see all over the place is people who care about looking good while doing evil.
But that's a phenomenon we wanted to explore, where people are realizing they can show who they really are, and people will love them for it. Which is weird, because that's actually one of the things that Davies talks about a lot. I just need to be able to show who I am, and people should love me for it.
I had problems with that, and a lot of us on the production team had the problems with that, of associating disability with evil. It doesn't even feel particularly queer to me. It just feels natural. This is the world.
Really is a it's okay when we do it moment. But that's what I think is the most interesting part of Doctor Who. We know at this point everything is going to have a theme, it's going to have a message. But I think doing that is less interesting than what they're trying to say, and who they're trying to say it to, how they apply their rules, and what you can learn from that. It's actually one of the best bits, and by best I mean most arranged, of this PowerPoint. We've got the various different circles that all intersect, but they talk about the difference between intersectional and intersecting. They ain't the same, because we should obviously be using slang in official state communications, but they actually bring up the Oppression Olympics. This is a term where two or more groups compete to prove themselves more oppressed than each other. This is where confusing intersecting with intersectionality can be oppressive and potentially dangerous.
By his invention, his genius, and their invention, their genius, it was a very hard time defeating them.
We're trying to force this belief system on the entire world and face this entire thing on safety culture and oppression, but don't you know, that's something that we're breaking ourselves. Until the next one where they go, this is what you're doing, but it's okay when we do it. Because hypocrisy isn't a principle that they hold. Nor should you. It's the decent way to act when you're dealing with decent people. But when you're not dealing with decent people, there's no need for it. The opposite side of you should treat people how you wish to be treated is you treat people how you wish to be treated. And so, if you're going to come out and start telling people that they need to submit to you, that they should just shut up and listen, that they should go away, touch grass and leave, well, that's how you're treating people. So that's how you want to be treated. That's how you need to be treated. And so at this point, with everyone involved in Doctor Who, from Ncuti Gatwa to Davis to Moffat, I still return to my opinion at the end of the last video. You really need to piss off and play Farmville. But those are just my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know down in the comments below. Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe for more videos like this in the future, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.